New question, the member from Toronto-Danforth.
Thank you, Speaker. Speaker, my question to the acting Premier. Recently, we learned how 5 tenants living at 795 College Street in Toronto were forced from their apartments so the landlord could complete renovations. The landlord ignored the tenants' right to reoccupy the units after the renovations were completed and instead rented the apartments out to new tenants at 3 times the rent. It's called a renoviction. Last year, the Premier had an opportunity to support NDP amendments to Bill 124 that would have closed loopholes that allow unethical landlords to use renovictions to force out tenants so they can jack up the rent. Why didn't the Premier support these amendments?
Thank you. Acting Premier.
Of Housing, Speaker.
Minister of Housing.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I want to thank the member for Toronto-Danforth for the question. In fact, Mr. Speaker, our government made substantial changes to expand rent control to all Ontario tenants. Previously, about 250,000 Ontario tenants did not enjoy the protection of rent control. We brought that change in. As part of our fair housing plan, Mr. Speaker, we wanted to make sure that tenants receive the protection that they require. We expanded the rent control system. We recently brought in the standard lease, which takes effect as of April 30th in a few days' time, and that will also give more protection to all Ontario tenants and make it clear what landlords' obligations are and what tenants' rights are. And I'm happy to address more of this issue in the supplementary, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Supplementary.
Well, you didn't protect these tenants. Speaker, back to the acting Premier. Landlords are still using pressure tactics to push tenants out so they can raise the rent to whatever level they want. In February, tenants in Parkdale claimed that their landlord neglected basic repairs, but then installed upscale amenities that the low-income tenants were supposed to pay for with above-guideline increases. These tenants were basically being forced to either finance the gentrification of their own units or face renoviction. Instead, they decided to go on a rent strike. Why must tenants go on a rent strike to keep their homes safe, properly maintained, and affordable? Why?
Thank you. Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm not able to speak to specific cases which might be before the Landlord-Tenant Tribunal, but, Mr. Speaker, we do have a strong Residential Tenancies Act that does have enforcement measures when a landlord breaks the law. And I know in some of these cases, the Rental Enforcement Unit of the Ministry of Housing is investigating, and if there are charges that are warranted, they would be laid following a proper investigation, Mr. Speaker. If a landlord attempts to have expenses put on an above-the-guideline increase, the Landlord-Tenant Tribunal can stop that, can mandate that only proper expenses are passed on to tenants. And where there's a situation where a landlord tries to illegally evict tenants, there are remedies to protect tenants, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you.